To give less money to social housing tenants with spare rooms are a wicked bedroom tax. Fraser Nelson is editor of The Spectator.
The government is spending far more money than it's getting in, and you've simply got to look at the welfare bill and ask. Last year, for example, they increased welfare 3 times more than the average earnings. Now, that wasn't cruel and heartless.
Changes to the structure of the NHS in England have also come into force. The government says local health and care services will improve as a result, but Labour says it will lead to full-blown privatisation. David Williams is a reporter for the Health Service Journal.
What comes into effect is a series of structural changes, primarily, abolishing the previous set of organisations that were planning and running the NHS and introducing a new set.
And the Financial Services Authority has been scrapped. It's being replaced by 2 new regulators in an effort to better police the sector. 3 men are being questioned on suspicion of the murder of a 22-year-old man at Guildford Railway Station in Surrey. The victim, who's been named locally as Ryan Harrison from Woking, was crushed by a train after a row with several other men on the platform. Paolo Di Canio says he's upset at the way he's been portrayed in the media since being appointed as Sunderland's manager. In a statement released through the club, he said his views on fascism were taken the wrong way. Our sports news reporter is Richard Conway.
It's a very impassioned plea. He says something can happen many years ago, but what counts is the facts. My life speaks for me. Of course it hurts me because people try to take your dignity, and that is not fair. He also talks at length about how he doesn't have a problem with racism, that it's absolutely stupid and ridiculous, as he puts it, that people would think he was in any way a racist.
Prosecutors in Colorado say they'll seek the death penalty against 25-year-old James Holmes, the man accused of killing 12 people and injuring 7 in a cinema shooting last July. Last week, the defence team said their client would plead guilty to avoid execution. South Korea has promised a strong and swift military response to any provocation from the North. Yesterday, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un promised to strengthen his country's nuclear programme. Kim Ok-min is a South Korean who works in construction just over the border in North Korea.
Once you're across the border, you don't really feel that tension. I work alongside North Korean workers. We don't really talk about that kind of stuff. They don't seem to know much stuff, so we're all just kind of doing our work, and that's it.
8 police officers have been arrested over the murder of 2 teenagers in Sao Paulo after images emerged from a security camera showing the killing. The boys, one of whom was just 14 years old, are seen being shot at close range by 2 men wearing motorcycle helmets. The Chief Constable of Norfolk says he's disappointed that one of his officers is seeking damages from a petrol station owner after tripping over a curb. Chief Constable Phil Gormley says the claim doesn't represent the approach and attitude of the overwhelming majority of his staff. Let's get the sport now. Here's Chris Latcham.
Rafa Benitez says Chelsea's main priority is still to qualify for the Champions League. That's after they reached the FA Cup semi-final earlier. They beat Manchester United 1-0 to set up a last 4 meeting with Manchester City at Wembley. In the last 6 years, Chelsea have reached the semis 4 times. They've won the cup on every occasion. Cardiff are 7 points clear at the top of the Championship after a 3-0 win over struggling Blackburn. They now need just 11 more points from 7 games to secure Premier League football for the first time. It's now just goal difference, though, that keeps Blackburn out of the Championship relegation zone. They're 1 point behind Wolves, who beat Birmingham 3-2 today to move out of the bottom 3. In the Championship's late kick-off, it's currently 0-0 at half-time between Leeds and Derby. And just to mark your card about tonight's 5 Live Sports, it's live from Craven Cottage, Fulham against QPR. That follows Drive at 7 o'clock. Super League leaders Wigan ran in an incredible 15 tries as they beat Hull Kingston Rovers 84-6. The bottom side Castleford lost to St Helens. And there was a 50-1 shock in the Irish Grand National as jockey Ben Dalton guided Liberty Council to victory.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening and welcome to Drive with Charlene White and Giles Dilnot. Our top story, the government says major changes to the welfare system which come into effect today will save money and encourage people back into work. Social housing tenants will have their benefit cut if they have a spare bedroom. More than 2 million households in England will now pay council tax for the first time. Here's the reaction from listeners to 5 Live's Your Call programme this morning.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, all these cutbacks. I think they're brilliant. It's about time that we faced the end of Benefits Britain?
The idea that this is all easy, that there are simple solutions. Of course you need to keep policing it to make sure nobody's swinging the lead. But in the end, you have to care for people who really need help.
Housing benefit has been a sort of the elephant in the room for disincentivising people to work. And if you get a big housing benefit, but you would lose it if you take a job, then you've got a reason not to take the job.
Most of these benefits are actually affecting people in work, and a lot of the policy makers seem to be those who don't share the same kind of lifestyles or even backgrounds to those sort of lifestyles of the people whose decisions they're affecting.
It's quite a worry, really. And not only that, it's hurting the vulnerable people who've got to pay council tax now, which we didn't have to do, and it's nearly £200. People in government have no conception, no idea. With 17 millionaires in that government, how can they know anything?
I'm getting myself back to a place where hopefully I can come off the benefits, but I'm still at that level where I can only earn so much from my business, and I do need help from working tax credits and with housing benefit, and now everything's being cut back, so I feel like I'm being cut back.
I can understand why they want to cut benefits, because at the end of the day we don't have enough money, but we don't have enough money because we're not encouraging growth. And I think that we end up in this polarised battle where everybody on benefits is scroungers or the rich have got far too much.
Phil Agulnuk is the director of the online benefits calculator Entitled2.com. He's also worked as an economist in the Department of Work and Pensions and the Treasury, and he joins us now. It's hard to make this really simple and easy for people, but the major changes that are going through today, just talk us through those.
OK, Giles, today there are two major changes. The first one is the bedroom tax, or under occupation subsidy, if you're a member of the government, which is for council house and housing association tenants with a spare room. And the other big change today is council tax benefit is being abolished and being replaced by local council tax support schemes.
Now, that does make it fairly simple, although, as we say, there'll be lots of arguments about whether it is or it isn't a tax, and the government clearly says it isn't. They're not just sweeping changes across the board. They also vary in local areas as well, don't they?
That's exactly right. So what the government did with council tax benefit was they gave the budget to local councils and said it's up to you how you spend it, but when you invent your new scheme, you need to save 10% of the budget. And councils have gone different ways around saving that money. Some of them haven't made any changes and have got the money from elsewhere. Scotland and Wales have done that, but lots of councils have made cuts and some have made deep cuts.
So actually trying to work out how much worse off or better off you might be as a person or affected is quite tricky, really, depending on where you live and what you collect.
Exactly. OK, so it's going to vary with your rent, whether you've got a spare room and whether you've got one or two spare rooms. That's a 14 or a 25% cut. And on...
Is that in any house?
Well... You've got to be a social tenant, so you've got to be renting from your council or renting from a housing association. But if you're doing that's correct. It's if you've got they deem that you've got more than the allowed number of rooms. Yes, that's the cut they'll put in place.
And you were continuing that. It is quite hard to work out.
Yes, so with council tax benefit, it varies from council to council. And of course, with these benefits, it's important to remember that you can get them in work as well as out of work because of the means test. So that's what our website, entitled2.co.uk, does that for you. You put in your details.
And what would you say is the tenor of people who are checking this out? Just working out, let's just get this so I know what we're dealing with, or people saying, oh my goodness, I'm going to be destitute?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, people, obviously, the first step is to find out how you're affected under the new system. And then the next bit is thinking about what to do with it. Now, there are things that people can do, such as the government have been encouraging people to get a lodger. For some people, that's going to be a good solution. For other people, it might be about employment or cutting expenditure. For lots of people, though, it is just going to be a very big worry. They're not clear what they're going to do, how they're going to manage.
Just from your experience in DWP, when you were working there, I mean, this is something governments have always tried to tackle, and government points out a third of what we spend, public money, is on welfare. You can understand why they try to tinker this and try to make it simpler.
I can understand that. The thing to realise is that when you're doing a big reform such as universal credit, it's very difficult if you're creating lots of losers as well as quite a lot of winners in the case of universal credit. And reforms like this are very difficult in an age of austerity. It's much easier to introduce reforms when the budget is there to essentially throw some money at it. And I think trying to bring in a big new reform programme while cutting money is really where the problem is.
Phil, thank you very much indeed for your time. Phil Ogulnik, who is the director of the online benefits calculator, Entitled2.com.